Before we go on, answer honestly. How do you know that you exist at all? Today we're looking at the most foundational truths, the ones every other belief depends upon. At first glance, nothing seems more obvious than your own existence. Even if you were in a simulation, something would still exist. At minimum, the experience itself. The fact you're having an experience is proof that the experience exists. That's all perfectly logical, but that's actually the issue. To say, I think, therefore I am, you already have to trust two things: that your experience is real, and that logic is valid. Those feel obvious, and they are true, of course, but they're actually more certain than your existence. Why? Because you only conclude that you exist by using experience and logic. Some people think that logic, and not experience, is the most certain starting point. To be clear, what we mean by logic is the laws of logic. To summarize, there are 4 laws of logic. 1. A thing is itself. 2. A thing is not something that is not itself. 3. Either a claim is true or it is not true. And 4. Nothing exists without explanation. I'm oversimplifying with that last law, but we'll cover that in a future video. If you want the technical names for these laws, they're on screen. Remember them, because we'll be using them in the series a lot. You can prove that logic is true, because if someone were to say that logic is not true, then that must follow the first law and second law in order to be true. The claim would have to be itself, and not something that is not itself. Otherwise, it could be false. Therefore, the claim, logic is not true, cannot be true. That argument works, but notice the issue. Arguments use logic. We use logic to defend logic. Not to mention, any argument against logic will use logic as well. This is a classic philosophical problem. You cannot prove anything without using logic, so you cannot prove logic without assuming it first. It's like trying to pull yourself out of a swamp by pulling on your own hair. The technical name for this is on screen if you want to look into it more. But there is something that requires no argumentation: your experience. Whatever you think about your experience, if you're hearing this video, it's happening. This is why many scholars say knowledge begins in the senses, or as St. Thomas Aquinas put it, intellectual knowledge is caused by the senses. It cannot be said that sensible knowledge is the total and perfect cause of intellectual knowledge, but rather that it is in a way the material cause. Breaking that down, that just means the abstract ideas in your mind, like math, science, and philosophy, are made out of your sensory experiences that you have had since you were in your mother's womb. The senses don't fully explain your abstract knowledge, but they are the material cause of it, that is, the raw stuff that is made from. Just as a house is made with wood, but also needs a builder, your abstract knowledge is made of the knowledge from your senses, but also shaped by your intellect. This is the common view in Christian philosophy, and in thinkers like Aristotle. But people often object that our senses can be unreliable. That's true. Illusions exist. For example, in this image, gray dots seem to appear even though they're not there. But notice, to recognize an illusion as an illusion, you still rely on your senses. Yes, sometimes we misperceive things, but that doesn't mean perception itself is untrustworthy. It shows that our senses are working with limited information and that our brains take shortcuts when processing it. If this kind of careful, step-by-step philosophy is helpful to you, feel free to like the video or subscribe so you don't miss the next part. At the end of the day, though, the only way we could figure out that our experience is more fundamental than logic is still by using logic. So for reason, truth, and knowledge to even be possible, we simply have to have faith in those two things from the start: our sense experience and the laws of logic. Many people avoid the word faith and call these self-evident truths. However, they are still saying the same thing, that they trust these things to be true. They cannot prove them except by having faith in them to begin with. Some people may say that faith is always irrational and unreasonable, but what we are having faith in is rationality and reason. Faith is not blind. Faith is simply an act of trust. Because of this natural faith, our understanding of the world starts to fill in, and we can put a lot more apples in the basket, so to speak. We trust our senses and logic, so it becomes obvious that the world exists, that other people exist, that apples don't just appear on tables, but that they come from trees, and that either there is a tree in your backyard, or there is not. Without this natural faith, it is impossible to trust your eyes and ears. Without this faith, it is impossible to trust reason or be a truth-seeking person at all. As it says in the letter to the Hebrews, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And whether or not He exists is what we'll be covering next.